Rhonda's here and she says, how is a conflict period different than a volatility cycle? So that's a great question. So a conflict period is related to an internal conflict in the market, which when you can determine that that conflict is there, the market is going to run away from a particular price point. It's going to make itself, it's going to go as far as it can from that number. I mean, this is just sort of a general way of expressing a conflict period. Now, it's a newer piece of work, and in order for the market to move away, it actually needs volatility to do that. So an argument could be made that, it's indistinguishable from a volatility cycle because a volatility cycle is going to run very far distances. But there are times where I don't have a volatility, specifically a volatility cycle that I can say, hey, this is when this big move is going to happen. And the conflict could be on its own, like it was this last time, from the 16th through the 22nd. That's really what caught our attention, was the conflict cycle, the conflict period, rather than the volatility cycle. Now, the conflict thing doesn't happen that often, at least from my understanding, right? I'm only limited in my understanding of any of this stuff, and the volatility cycle happens much more often. But the conflict has a tendency to run a lot further and be a lot more compressed in its run, perhaps, than a volatility cycle. I'm not sure that they're distinguishable, honestly, from an observer's viewpoint. Because if I say to you, I could have just as well said, this here is your, let me get this up. Here is a, let's get back over the daily. Here's a volatility cycle, right? And that's great, a big move. But the thing is that I'm looking for something to trigger my interest and my insight that something important is about to happen. And there's a number of ways of doing that. So volatility cycles are much more common than conflict periods. I'll use either of them, but I would agree with you that they're probably indistinguishable from each other from the outside looking in. But I didn't discover this movement through the volatility method. I discovered it through the conflict on this particular one. Obviously, if you come across a period, like we have a period coming up, in fact, Rhonda, you're in the meeting, so you know this, but it happens to be on the weekly, where there is kind of a volatility cycle coming, but we need the market to close above a certain level, which you know what that level is, in order to indicate that that volatility is coming in. If we get that this week, it makes the following weeks very important, and potentially the market would be much, much higher. So I am kind of interested in that.